Alaska's wilderness is one of the last spots in North America untouched by modern society. But preserving the mountains, rivers, and valleys has been a struggle for conservationists for more than 100 years. Now, historian Douglas Brinkley recounts the fight in his new book, The Quiet World: Saving Alaska's Wilderness Kingdom. And this morning we are joined by the author, Douglas Brinkley. Thanks for being with us
today.
Thanks
for having
we do
me.
appreciate
I appreciate it.
Well, okay, so the book documents preservation efforts from 1879 to 1960, but the struggle is still going on today.
Oh, absolutely. And I begin with the 1870s because that's when John Muir, the great naturalist writer, went up from San Francisco and he wrote about the glaciers, and he couldn't believe how beautiful the inside passage of Alaska was. He came back and basically created ecotourism to Alaska. A lot of your viewers dream of taking the cruise up to see the orcas and the forested islands and all of the Alexander Archipelago. They became a preservationist zeal for Alaska. Well, at the same time, they found gold. And back then in the 19th century, the gold today is oil. So in places like I write about in the book, in 1960, Dwight Eisenhower created the Arctic Refuge, which the oil companies call ANWR, because it sounds good to drill ANWR, but if you say the Arctic Refuge, you say, well, we don't want to drill a wildlife refuge. A battle's always there between the pro-development extraction people and those who say, let's save a lot of Alaskan wilderness and natural resources for our children's children.
What always comes up when you talk about Alaska, should we decide to drill? Is that the answer to everything? In your book, what kind of information can we gather about that?
Well, that oil's become this great, it's the new gold, and that in my view, the Arctic Refuge, it's too important to keep as a refuge. This is the primary polar bear denning area. It's where the caribou herds are, and Shell Oil right now is sitting right outside wanting to get in. 7 out of 10 Alaskans want to get in. But my view is leave the oil there and keep it as a wildlife refuge after studying this history, because it's an heirloom to give to our kids, and the oil's not disappearing, we're not losing it, but meanwhile it's a important biosphere for so many types of birds and fish and wildlife that we need to preserve it.
And speaking of that fight to preserve Alaska and its natural resources, there were a number of times when some ecological damage could have been done. Wasn't there a plan at one time to detonate an atomic bomb?
Well, absolutely, and not just that. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II, we did detonate one in the Aleutian chain and destroyed a great ecosystem, really. And a man I write about named Sea Otter Jones came in and tried to save the sea otters of the Aleutian and the bird life. Then we had Project Chariot, where Edward Teller, father of the hydrogen bomb, wanted to drop an atomic bomb to make an oil port to get that oil out of Alaska. All the while, the Arctic Ocean is so rough and so primitive and wild in so many ways that the idea that you're ever going to control it in any ways doesn't really work. So there's a feeling now that offshore drilling after the BP spill should be banned in Arctic Alaska, and I could see why, because to ruin what's like Yellowstone or Yosemite, to ruin our great Arctic refuge would be a great tragedy.
There's a lot of historical information in this book. As people read it, if there was one thing, what's the one thing you want them to come away with?
That we got to care about land conservation and sea conservation, and that we have great Americans that fought for Alaska. And you just don't go there and look at the beauty. People like Walt Disney went up there to save the northern fur seals, and people like William O. Douglas, great Supreme Court justice, went to protect the caribou there. All the great fisheries of the southern part of Alaska were protected by people like Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt. So it's in the American grain to save our great landscape. When you sing America the Beautiful, we love all of this wild America, but it comes with the cost, and the cost is leave it alone. Some places don't need roads, they don't need construction. We need some solitude and quiet, and these great preserves that our government runs, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, don't need to be molested, particularly in the next 10, 20 years when we're trying to get off of oil. Let's leave what we've got alone and find alternative energy, but to just kind of willy-nilly start gouging Arctic Alaska right now in the era of global warming is ludicrous.
Well, it's definitely an issue that has a lot of debate behind it. We do appreciate your insights and dealing with Alaska and this new book that you have out. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.